It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired fire chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back. Beneath the Helmet, season number 2. We have episode number 47 today. Today, I got to sit down with a Canadian who's been in the fire service, now is an ambassador for spreading and smashing the stigma around mental health across Canada and the world. You may be very familiar with his artwork. His artwork is often found in offices, fire stations, first responder agencies. I get to sit down with him and kind of explore his history, what kind of brought him through PTSD, and the beautiful part about that he is now no longer challenged with PTSD as defined by the DSM. So he once had it. He actually got diagnosed twice with PTSD. And now if he got reassessed with all the work that he's done professionally and internally in himself, he no longer meets that PTSD requirement. So quite an inspirational story. Today, I got a chance to sit down with Daniel Sundahl. So Daniel is one of those people that, like I said, you've probably seen his artwork all over social media, and he's got an excellent website for you to check out to see his artwork. So after everything that Daniel's gone through, if you can believe it, he is now transitioning his career to be a certified professional mental health therapist. So I believe he graduates in July of 2024, and he's going to be a huge asset for so many people around North America and Canada, especially. So warm welcome to Daniel, and it's going to be a great episode. He's got lots of wisdom and nuggets to share, and we'll also make sure that you check out his artwork. Links will be down below. And I encourage you to finish off, if you haven't already joined our online Facebook community, Beneath the Helmet Facebook group. I invite you to join very like-minded individuals. The group is growing on a daily basis, lots of interaction, lots of stories and wisdom shared. So I invite you to join that community and extend the conversation. All right. Until next time, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Until then, stay well. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Beneath the Helmet, another amazing episode today. Season 2. I got Daniel Sundahl on the line here today. We're going to have a great conversation about his story, his artwork, which is just a phenomenal, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen this on social media, probably hanging in a lot of fire stations and first responder stations around Canada for sure. So welcome to Beneath the Helmet, Daniel. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Arjuna. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about who Daniel is and kind of where you grew up from and what brought you to kind of where you are today.
Okay, well, I'm from Alberta. I was born and raised in Edmonton, and I knew pretty early on my life that I wanted to live a full, exciting life. Like that came to that realization pretty early. So right after high school, I did some music, went to Grab Q and did some music courses, and then I really wanted to travel, so moved to BC, and then from there I started traveling the world and lived in Japan and Mexico and the Cayman Islands and several different places, as fulfilling that dream of living a full life. And when I was in the Cayman Islands, I was working, well, I was a dive master there. And part of our training was to become medic diving. And that's when I first learned CPR and I loved it. And then one day I was driving home and saw this guy walk across the street and get smoked by a giant dump truck. And I was so excited. Pulled over. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to save this guy. Ran up to him and he's like full enough. I had no idea what to do. We didn't learn that stuff, but I was really excited. So that's kind of the point where I thought, well, maybe I need to be a paramedic. Realizing, yeah, that would probably fulfill my need to live a full life. And it certainly did. So traveled the world a bit more and became a EMT, a primary care paramedic, what we call them these days, back in 1996. And then a advanced care paramedic in 2003. And then I got hired with the fire department that was doing integrated service where they just started up doing that. And I was one of the originals that worked there. And that was full time in 2003. So I was full time paramedic firefighter for 20 years.
Wow.
And then officially medically retired a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
So now I'm retired from that, diagnosed with PTSD twice. And now I'm back in school learning to become a counseling therapist, which is my next career.
It's so amazing that you're taking that trauma and that experience that you had that was, negative in some aspects and turn it into gold, right?
Oh, yeah.
But by being able to share your art, your photography, but also now then into counseling, right? So that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. And that's where the artwork came from, part of my therapy. I never intended to share it with people. And I still do it as a way to process and get things out of my head. I'm just lucky that our peers from all around the world can look at it, and well, some of our peers connect to it and can connect with their own experiences in it. And it can do the same for them, which I didn't think was going to happen. I thought the opposite would happen, but yeah, I'm very, very lucky.
Very cool. So going through your whole journey of what sounds like 2 times you got diagnosed with PTSI, how have you become a better Daniel since, learning about PTSI, being diagnosed with it? How has your personal growth changed in your life?
Well, quite a bit. Like I'm post-traumatic growth is really kind of my thing. It's what I really share with people. And then really it's a message of hope. I do my own conference about it. And I meet hundreds of our peers that are experiencing post-traumatic growth, benefits from having that experience and walking through it and coming out better on the end. And I'm actually learning the neuroscience of why that actually happens. So it's a very positive message that I never knew about. Being on your show is a perfect example. I never would have been on your show if I didn't experience that trauma and worked through it and found a solution for me, which in my case was the artwork, amongst other things. And now I get to travel the world, exhibit my artwork, and speak about my experience of post-traumatic growth. So I'm very, very lucky, which never would have happened if I didn't have the traumatic experiences that I did.
Mhm. So maybe for the listeners who don't totally wrap their head around what that means, what is post traumatic growth to you?
Yeah, when
especially?
I first heard about it, a psychologist told me about it, and he goes, "Dan, you're experiencing post-traumatic growth." And I'm like, "Well, do I need to see a doctor? Like, what's happening?" I had no idea what it was.
Mhm.
And they go,
Is it a
"No."
growth?
Yeah, I'm like, "Wow, what, is it a bad side effect? What's
Yeah.
happening? Can you see it? Like, what's that?" I
Yeah.
didn't know. I had no idea what it was. And then when I started studying it and learning more about it, then I realized it's very prominent in our society.
Mhm.
Even if you think of any superhero origin story, it's post-traumatic growth. Like, again, that's not real, but I see it in real examples of people that I meet every day. Uh, but for example, let's say Spider-Man gets bit by a spider, and because of that bite, now he's got superheroes. The Hulk's the same way. Batman's the same way. Wonder Woman, if you think through all the superhero,
Mm.
how they became their powers is from a traumatic event, which now gave them these amazing powers.
Mm.
But I see it all the time as well in everyday people going through experiences like that. And there's a lot of beliefs. There's some religions that believe there's no growth without suffering. So it's not really a new concept. It's there, but I never really thought to apply it to myself. And I never really recognized the benefits of how that experience made me a better person. So by definition, I think it's a psychological change resulting in growth to achieve a higher status than you were prior to the trauma.
Yeah, I never considered that about the superhero
I
kind
know,
of
right?
thought
And
there. That just
everybody
paints a
knows that,
picture. Yeah, it
right?
just
Everyone
paints
knows that. Oh yeah,
yeah.
no, everyone. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of a lot of real life examples of that too, for
Mm.
sure.
So I'd love to hear some of the things that kind of brought you out of that trauma state into a thriving Daniel today.
Yeah, it was really, for me, it wasn't different. Like I always thought that, I know you call it PTSI.
Mm.
And that's, I don't know if we want to talk about it. And I totally
Sure,
understand
yeah.
like the injury
Yeah, please.
versus the disorder,
Yeah, please go for it.
but I know like the DSM-5 is still PTSD, and
Yep.
they might be changing that. But when I really looked it up, I'm like, okay, what does disorder mean? A disorder is a dysfunction of thought emotions and behavior, uh, resulting in dysfunction daily living. Right. So I know it's not a popular opinion, but I still call it PTSD. I believe it with that definition, it is a disorder as a result of that injury.
Right.
Right. So I believe it's an injury, but as a result of that injury that we have, we now fall into that definition of a disorder because yeah, I certainly had a dysfunction of my thought, um, my emotions and my behavior because of that injury. So I believe I had a disorder as
Yeah.
resulting from that injury. So,
Totally fair.
but yeah, for me, I didn't know. I always thought it was like you're kind of normal. And then you have the one event. I always thought, when you had that diagnosis or when you received that injury, it was, okay, you had that one call and now you're different. Because of that one call, you're now impaired. And then the idea is that we want to work our way back up to the way we were. And that happens based on your resiliency level. But while you do that work and build new neural pathways, then you can go higher than you were prior. But for me, I had a long career of many stressors my line was a gradual decline to impairment. So gradual, I didn't notice it. So I was suicidal, had a suicide plan, and I never thought to ask for help because I had my answer, but I didn't think there was anything wrong. It wasn't that sudden for me. So I never reached out to our EAP programs. I never reached out to ask for help from people, but I definitely had symptoms like some suicidation is a big one. But easy to anger, isolation, became very apathetic, not caring about stuff, but really bad depression, anxiety, all the textbook definitions of that injury, of post-traumatic stress injury. And I just didn't know that I had. I just thought I was having a bad day. And then one day we listened to a psychologist talk at work. So our fire department, actually the whole city, which it's great that this is back in 2014.
Yeah.
So it was great that back then, 10 years ago, that the city was forward thinking to have a psychologist come in and talk to all the departments in the city about post-traumatic stress. So we came in, we're on shift. Our captain says, yeah, we got to go listen to this guy talk about mental health. I'm like, my God, we got to go listen to this guy talk about mental health. We all went in there. This psychologist was talking about all the signs and symptoms. And I'm like, holy crap, I have a lot of those signs and symptoms. Then we went back to the fire hall. We're making dinner. I'm like, hey guys, did you guys connect with any of those symptoms? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, no, me neither. The next day I phoned for an appointment, made an appointment, got assessed and was diagnosed with PTSD. I had no idea I had it, even though I had a plan to kill myself. But what I've learned now is that my neurology changed so much that I'd lost the capacity to understand what that actually meant. I really thought that I would kill myself, then I'd be okay. I didn't really want to die, but that's how much it changed over probably 10 years. My cognitive function and how I became that impaired that I wasn't able to recognize it. And that I thought killing myself would be the answer. And I expressed those emotions now in a lot of my artwork. So I was diagnosed first in 2014. And with the help of my psychologist, that's when I started doing the artwork, where I was able to purge these things out of my head. So I was very lucky. Two big hurdles are learning that you're injured. Sometimes it's not as obvious. Maybe you don't recognize the signs. So if you do, then finding what helps. So finding the right therapist or finding the right coping mechanisms that are benefit to you. It's not the same for everybody. So those are the two big hurdles: realizing that something was wrong, and finding what made me feel better. And that's kind of how it started with the artwork. And I'm just really I play the guitar too. I'm not very good, so no one invites me on their podcast for me to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star for them. But that's another thing. I do lots of things. The art thing is the big one, but that's kind of how it all started. And now I'm totally different. I've rewired my brain, and I'm a different person I was even before I was a paramedic, even before the trauma.
Beautiful. That's great to hear. So going back to your schooling that you're doing right now for your therapist, you talked about the neuroscience and the neuroplasticity. You maybe paint a little picture of how that's changed for you in your own body. You kind of touched on it slightly there, but maybe just how what you're learning now is kind of painting a clearer picture for you about what transpired in your brain.
Yeah, I'm almost done. I graduate in July. So as I'm going through this program, I'm essentially analyzing myself. Every course I take, I'm like, oh, that's why I did that. Oh, that's why I was behaving that way. It's really interesting. And the way I kind of just I think of it as when you have a neural pathway or a connection is made, for most of us, let's say it's a traumatic experience. Every time we remember it or think of it or have a flashback, that pathway gets redone. Like it goes over and over and over. And like walking through a thick forest, when you first walk through that forest, it's kind of hard to walk through it. But if you walk through it over and over and over and over and over, that pathway is going to get wider and wider the more it's traveled until eventually for me, that pathway was like a 12-lane wide superhighway. So whenever I would have a new experience at work or I would think of an old experience, that memory would go a million miles an hour and slam into my memory banks. So it was a really easy pathway for it to go. And if you don't use that pathway, then it's going to grow over like that forest. It'll prune over is what we call it. But through my case, and the science is the same, through therapy where you try to remember that experience while using your frontal cortex to kind of interfere with the natural, um, it's called the HP axis. So when you have that memory, then you have the emotional response and then your behavior changes. It all happens automatically. And that's how it should go. That's how our body's designed to go. So we don't have to stop and think about dangerous things in our lives. The body automatically does things so we can survive. So through therapy, you can have those experiences interfere with your frontal cortex. So like in my case, when I'm creating the artwork, I'm recalling that memory while activating a creative side of my brain and my frontal cortex. It's still emotional, but I'm in control of it. So I'm in control of it. And I'm building a new neural pathway while I'm doing that. With trauma, there's a disconnection between your amygdala and your frontal lobe. And by doing work like this, and a lot of the therapies for trauma are around this, where you are building a neural pathway and removing the emotional response to the memory. And that's what I was doing. So when I was done with the artwork, I essentially trapped this organic monster in my brain that invaded my consciousness uninvited into this two-dimensional picture. Then I can recall that event, but I wouldn't have the emotional response.
Hmm.
And over time, I was actually able to alter how I remembered those events as well by recreating them how I wanted them to be in my artwork. So yeah, the science is really quite fascinating, and I find it really, really interesting. But while doing that, I'm building new neural pathways. So now I'm building a new pathway through that forest, which is because of the neuroplasticity. The old pathways are being pruned over, and I'm building new, healthier pathways, which is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then that is actually the growth part where I've rewired my brain. And because of that, I'm thinking different. I have different perspectives, which is a big part of post-traumatic growth and trauma recovery in general. In therapy, we try to change cognitive processes. We try to reframe situations, reframe cognitive perceptions and when we do that, we build those new neural pathways and prune over the old ones. So that's really fascinating, and it works.
I love that stuff. It totally intrigues me how amazing the brain is, the human brain.
Right?
Yeah. And the rewiring part of it, and, recovering from trauma and stories that you can just rewire that and make those new paths. That's incredible.
The problem is, though, like for first responders that are still being exposed to that initial trauma. So if you're trying to prune over that, like if you're trying to deconstruct a highway when there's cars still going on it, it's pretty hard, right? Whereas, you had a traumatic experience in the past, and the only time that's being traveled again is through flashbacks or memory. If you're having new experiences, you're going to work and having the same experiences, then that's a little bit different. That could be a little bit more difficult. In those cases, It's, okay, well, how, if it's becoming dysfunctional in your life, that's where the treatment is. Okay, well, let's try to figure out how to live with that. But sometimes the solution is to leave, which is what happened to me. You know what? One of my favorite theories is the radical acceptance theory. Love it. So the radical acceptance theory goes like this: if there's something in your life, could be anything, that you're not happy with, you essentially have 4 options. You can, 1, try to change it. So let's use the example of toxic workplace. That should be something that maybe many of us are used to,
Oh, yes.
familiar
Yeah,
with. So let's
100%.
say you have a toxic workplace and it's really starting to affect your job. And the first thing you do is try to change it. So if there's things that you don't like, you can go to the chiefs or go to the officer and say, hey, look, here's an option. This is an issue in our department. Here's why. This is how it's affecting our department. And here's the solution for it. Here's how we can actually make this better. What is it? What do you guys think? So that's one thing, to try to make the situation better.
Mhm.
The second option is to try to live with it, which is, in therapy, we would do cognitive restructuring to try to change your perception, or let's try to see if you can look at it from a different angle. And it's like a duck with water running off its back. That's a lot more work. And takes time to do that by changing your perception and how you see things. So that's the second option. The third option is you can leave the situation. So you can quit that job, you can quit that relationship, you can just remove yourself from that situation. The fourth option is you do nothing and you just suffer the consequences. Those are pretty much the 4 options you have, right? So, and a lot of people are kind of stuck in that fourth option, or they're just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and they just suffer the consequences without doing anything. So I really like that, and I applied actually to many aspects of my life, right? I'm like, okay, which option am I gonna pick? Now, when I had a lot of stresses in my life, things were pretty rough. I wrote down all the stresses in my life, and I realized, which ones do I have to keep and which ones can I omit from my life? I quit the ones that were in my life that I could omit. I was the practical coordinator at my fire department, and it was causing me a lot of stress. And so I told my chief, like, hey, can we give this off to somebody else? I got a lot of stuff going on and I don't think I'm being effective at this position anymore. And so I was able to remove myself from that position. And all the ones that I couldn't remove, like the traumatic calls that I went on the ambulance. And I've been, okay, how can I better manage the effects of this for myself? So that's I did it with the help of, many therapists and mental health coaches and teams and stuff. So it can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. I recall when I was in my initial phases of burnout that I did the same thing. I wrote down all the big stressors in my life. And when I finished a page, going on to page 2, I was like, what? Holy cow, this is not good.
It's like,
Page
that's
3, yeah.
right.
I
You
was
don't
like,
know. It's
yeah,
great. It's very powerful. It's powerful to actually write
it
them
was.
down.
Yeah.
I do that. I'm a practicum, and I have a lot of clients, and that's what I have them do. Where, okay, well, let's write it out, and especially on paper. Sometimes it's the opposite way. It's like, oh, well, maybe I don't have as many as I thought. Then we can kind of focus on the one thing that's really affecting your life.
Yeah, 100%. Great job. So going back to that story you talked about originally about being in the fire station and that therapist coming in or that professional coming in and telling you about mental health and what
Mhm.
that was like. What would be your nuggets to share with our audience today of what mental health is and what some signs might be that our listeners are like, that's not me, until they hear you say it. And then they might click and go, maybe that is me. Maybe I do need some support. What would be
Yeah.
some of those things to look out for?
Well, for me, some of the symptoms that I had were sleep disturbance, which many emergency workers have. So I would sleep maybe 4 to 6 hours a night, even if I didn't have to wake up early. It was really difficult for me to fall asleep. I had to have white noise, or I'd have to anchor my mind to something, and I wouldn't sleep very well. Wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, have really bad nightmares. So that was one thing that happened. And even now, even after 2 years off the ambulance and the trucks, I'm just now starting to get normal sleep patterns back after 2 years. Um, so sleep disturbances, um, I became very withdrawn and my confidence started to drop. Look, I was the clinical educator. I was an ACLS instructor, a PALS instructor, and I was a senior guy there, and my confidence started to drop. And one of the things that happened to me was and that started affecting my job, is when I would try to silence my mind, or when I would try to sit just and relax, all these horrible images and horrifying things would pop into my mind. And what I realized is by that happening, it really stopped the connection that I had with, um, God, how can I describe it? Like the creative connection to external sources where, I think, okay, and then something just pops in my head, like the answer pops into my head, right? Which happens now where I can just think of something and then the universe will give me the answer. So when things were bad, that connection, that communication was cut off, because whenever I would try to open my mind up and silence it so I can receive inspiration and creativity, uh, all these other things would pop in and interfere that. And that caused a lot of problems for me. So I became very withdrawn, very isolated. I didn't want to go out and see people. I felt very vulnerable. I felt unsafe. Uh, my coping mechanism was food. So I'd gained like almost 100 pounds, which is horrible as a firefighter and paramedic to be that much overweight. A lot of people turn to drugs and alcohol, but for me, it was food was the one thing that made me feel better. My fuse got really short, so I got really angry. And then when it burned, I got angry quickly and really quick. My sex drive dropped to zero, which caused a lot of problems at home. My wife, of course, thought that I didn't love her and didn't find her attractive, which wasn't true. But the truth is I didn't love and find joy in anything in the world anymore. And the thing that was really scary is that these things they happened very gradual and I didn't notice them. I just thought I was having a bad day. Um, yeah, so those are the symptoms that I had, which are, I guess, essentially they're pretty much textbook. And then I had the thoughts of death and dying, which eventually grew into actual having a suicide plan, thinking that was an okay and good idea. I didn't really understand, or I lost the capacity what that actually meant. I just didn't want to feel anything anymore, is what my goal was, because it was constant. It was constant every day, and probably worse at night, because at night my consciousness couldn't defend myself, and that's probably why I had horrible dreams. So it was actually worse at night, and during the day it was bad. So that constant barrage of those feelings and emotions over 10 years, well, that's going to do some damage,
Definitely. Yeah.
right?
And a lot of those things you mentioned is things that I've experienced or people that I've interviewed on this podcast, same kind of thing. So for those who are listening right now, it's like these are definitely some of the top ones that people are going to experience. Just to kind of, have some little introspection on yourself and
Yeah. Yeah,
check in on
they're
yourself.
common. And it's same for burnout as well, right? This burnout and PTSD is
Very
signs
close.
symptoms are very, very similar, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
You
so yeah,
talked about
they're common signs of that.
Yeah, you talked about anchoring in your sleep. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I couldn't, if I tried to fall asleep by relaxing and doing deep breathing, and when I finally emptied my mind, then all these things would come in. So I had to give my mind an anchor. So in order for me to fall asleep. So I'd either play a game on my phone, like whatever those lots of different games that, like the mindless games I didn't have to think too much on, until I was actually falling asleep playing the game. Or I'd listen to music, or I'd have a fan going. Because if I just laid in bed with no noise and stopped thinking, then I would have a lot of intrusive thoughts. What it's called. So there's a lot of intrusive thoughts that would come in and into my consciousness, um, and then I couldn't sleep because of it, and that made it really difficult.
Hmm. Yeah, I think sleep is one of the key things because really,
Oh,
if you don't have good sleep, your mental health is going to decline rapidly, right? So
100%. Yeah, that is like a massive. We do a lot of work with self care,
yeah,
and that is
definitely.
the number one thing. Like
Yep.
you need to get sleep, and if you can't get sleep, then we're going to work on how. And there are a lot of things you can try to get sleep. Um, Even if you are having intrusive thoughts, there's a lot of things you can try. But yeah, that is a paramount thing that needs to happen.
Beautiful. So I'd love to dive into your artwork because I know that's a big part of your life right now and a big part
Hmm.
of your growth and your recovery. I'd love to kind of hear not the inspiration, but what started this? You mentioned it was part of your therapy.
Mhm.
Why painting? Was that something you already did in your previous part of your
Yeah,
life?
there's actually photo based. So I take a photo, then I digitally draw and paint on the photo on this thing. So there's like a big screen that is a
Gotcha.
digital pen that I can touch, and
Yep.
it's pressure and tilt sensitive.
Mhm.
And yeah, my psychologist knew through the couple sessions that we had that I like photography and taking pictures of landscape and my dogs, and then kind of editing, post processing them with this painterly effect where I draw on top of it. And he said, Dan, maybe you can try, knowing what the neurobiology was like, where he knew that if I did this, I'd be activating the creative center in the frontal lobe while I'm thinking of the traumatic experiences, which is processing them. And he said, Dan, maybe you can try integrating the hobby that you have with processing the experiences you had. And I'm like, no, that's a horrible idea. I'm like, I don't want to step into this stuff. I came here so you can fix it. Like, give me a pill so I can go back to work. Like, I didn't want to think
To
about it,
escape it. Yeah.
to escape it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he says, no, that's not how it works. You need to like step into it and feel it. I'm like, oh, that sounds terrible. That sounds really scary. So I tried it, and he was 100% right. When I faced it, when I stepped right into it and faced it, I was able to put it away in this two-dimensional image. And I was really shocked. And once I found that out, I'm like, oh, thank God that I found something that makes me feel better. But I never shared them for a long time. The first images were, this paramedic in the back of the ambulance with gloved hands on his head. There's a dead body on the stretcher and a ghost in the airway seat, and which was representative of a call that I did. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to share this. Like, what would even my fellow firefighters think if they saw this with this distraught paramedic, gloved hands on his head, and this ghost looking angry at him? Like, they're not going to understand it. And I didn't make it for them in the first place. It was all for me. And I have to be really authentic when I create it in order for that process to work for me,
Right.
for me to purge it out of my head. So I don't censor them. I don't audit them. I don't think, oh, what are people going to think? Or people not going to like it? That doesn't happen. So I kept creating all this artwork, and I didn't share them with anybody. And I guess I was scared that no one else felt this way. And I didn't want people to know that I felt this way, and I would see it in this artwork that I created. But then one day I thought, I am going to share it just on my Facebook with the 30 friends that I knew personally on it, fully expecting to get crucified for it. But the exact opposite happened. So I didn't realize that other people would look at it and really connect to it, which really validated me and made me feel great, because then I realized, wow, I'm not alone. And that was wonderful. And then when I started doing that, then that's really when my life really changed, actually. And that's when it blew up, and people started asking me to come and exhibit at different conferences. And then people asked me about why I created it. And then I told them, like, you should be speaking. And so really blew up into this thing.
Yeah.
And I just published my fourth art book and
That's
travel
awesome.
all around the world. And yeah, it's been really great.
Yeah. You got calendars out and everything,
Got
right?
calendars out.
Yeah.
I share it everywhere as much as I can.
Love it. So all these images that you create, are they all your stories, or do you ever paint images that you just know that other people might get something out of as a message?
Yeah, the majority of them are my own. Um,
Mhm.
Sometimes I often get emails from people that have other experiences, and they share them with me.
Mhm.
And if I can connect with them, which I usually can, because we have emergency services, first responders, we have similar experiences no matter where we are. So if I can understand what that concept is, then then an image pops in my head, and then I create it. I do a lot of custom work for people, like portraits,
Right.
like retirement stuff, and they'll send me photos, and I'll do some artwork from that.
Mhm.
But I need to name them. They're like the concept images, are the ones that like I don't want to call them the scary images, but the very Dan Sunny ones that you look at, you're like, holy crap, and there's hidden things in there. Those ones are almost all of them come from my head, and that's how I purge from them. And people do ask if I can create artwork for them. If I can't connect with it, I won't do it. Now, however, I have done it for areas that I'm not familiar with. So police, communications, dispatchers, surgical suites like the one behind me, and I haven't been in there. So what I do in those cases is I'll sit and I'll interview the people. And sometimes like the communications ones I've done, I'll sit in with the dispatchers and talk to them for hours until I really feel I have a good idea of what their experiences like, what the stresses are, so that I have a good feeling of what it's like. And then I have them describe a call to me when they feel safe to do so. And then I then have a good idea of the emotion. However, it's a different profession, or whatever the source of the traumatic experience is, the symptoms are very similar. So they can tell me what the event was, but I can still relate to it in the effects of that event. When they start telling me how it changed them, I'm like, yeah, that I understand. Like that I really connect with. Um,
Yeah, the human body reacts no matter what profession you're in, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I have done. So yeah, the answer is yes, I have done. I
Yes.
have done them for other people.
Is there one that really resonates with you that's like, this changed my life?
Yeah. And it's probably the darkest, most messed up one I ever did.
Mm.
Uh, it's called, I got into a lot of negative feedback when I shared it, but it's the one that was most powerful for me. And it's called, The Demon Eats the Ambulance Driver. And I called it ambulance driver on purpose. So half the negative emails that I got in response to was ambulance driver. Why are you calling us ambulance driver? I'm like, I know
Yes.
that we don't like that. I know that, but that's why I called it. And the image is a paramedic. His arms are down and a big I use demons to represent trauma and angels to represent recovery.
Mm.
And this demon is gripping this paramedic and eating his head, like literally chewing off his head. It's pretty nasty. And the image represents the act of suicide. So the paramedic isn't defending himself. He doesn't feel like he's a paramedic anymore. That's why I called it the ambulance driver. And he is literally being consumed by his trauma, is the idea of it. So when I have a concept in my head, I have something happens, and then I think about it, then an image pops into my head that best portrays that complex idea. So once the image is in my head, I consider an art piece successful is how closely I can reproduce that image in my head. And sometimes the image in my head isn't like a two-dimensional piece. It's kind of organic and it's moving. So the most accurately that I can match that, that's a successful art piece for me. And that one is the most accurate. So when I look at that, I feel how I felt, right? Where I'm not fighting back. I'm letting it happen. And I'm just being consumed by it. And for those people that have been there, they really connect with it. So when I travel and I exhibit my artwork, some people ask me about it. I don't have it on my table because that's kind of how disturbing it is. And I always have someone underneath the desk with people at, because I know why they're asking about it.
Right.
And then I'll sign an autograph for them and give it to them.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Wow,
that's
that's
probably
powerful.
it's the best. It's the one that one of my favorite artists, and I love art history.
Mm.
I like learning more about the artists than the actual artwork that they do, because I feel the artwork that they do is the result of the experiences that the artists are having. Certainly is in my case.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite artists is Francisco de Goya, a Spanish artist. And he was doing artwork during the Spanish Revolution. And he has this image called Saturn Devours His Sons.
Mm.
And it's a similar, kind of got inspired by that, where this big monster is kind of eating his children. And it's from a black series of images that he did, which he never intended on showing somebody. He was in a house, painted it on the walls of his house. He was a portrait painter for royalty. And when they found all these images, it was a true reflection of kind of the mental state of what he was going through. It was a different reasoning, like his motivation for that. Literally not
Wow.
sure what was
Wow.
happening, but I doubt it was because of suicide, based on what he was titling it at. But yeah, I really like that guy. His artwork is amazing. And that was kind of a little bit of the inspiration for
Mm.
that one.
Yeah, as much as it's dark and maybe gory for some people to look at, it's so beautiful that you were able to process your trauma through that art, right? I think that's beautiful. So
Yeah, it was super healing
Yeah.
for him, very
Yeah.
cathartic. And when I was done, I felt so much better to get that, like, how do you describe suicide? How I was feeling at that time in a image. Like, how do you portray such a complex emotion and feeling? It's different for everybody, but for me, it was, yeah, I just felt like I needed to give up. Like I couldn't handle it anymore. I was trying so hard to just move on day and day and day. I had no joy in my life. It was like took a lot of energy, and I was starting to decline. I'm like, God, I'm just exhausted. Like 10 years of this, I'm just so exhausted. Um, that just that moment of, okay, I just can't do it anymore. Like I just don't want to feel anything anymore. And then you can't see the paramedic is facing away, and he's just literally being consumed. It's like, okay, I give up. Okay, take like I can't. I don't have the strength or capacity to go on anymore.
Do you
And
think
that's that. And when I finished the image, I'm like, oh, that's perfect,
Mhm.
perfect.
Do you think there'll be a day that you hang up that art tool that you've kind of completed your images of your past trauma, or
No,
is that
no.
something you want to continue until you
Oh,
can no longer?
I'll continue doing the artwork, but
Yeah,
even if you look at my artwork from 10 years ago to today, it's changing quite a bit.
yeah,
Because my experiences are changing quite a bit. So now a lot of the artwork that I do portrays some of the recovery, portrays what's defining what's actually happening. Like the last one I did, well, I think it was a week ago, was the concept of identifying with your trauma.
mm,
So it was this paramedic hugging his devil, hugging his demon in a comforting way. Because many of us, we have these symptoms of trauma for so long that they become familiar with us. And it's difficult for us to let it go, either because, if you have the diagnosis and you're off work and you're getting benefits because of it, um, or, you have to be reassessed every few months. So you have to reprove your symptoms, or, um, if you do get better, then what are you going to be? Because you identify with that so strongly, especially if you've been told you can't go back to work. Then the fear of not knowing what you're going to do is harder than identifying with what you know. And that is a massive hurdle, actually a massive wall for recovery. So a lot of us who had that feeling, is very difficult for us to move forward and move past our trauma because we identify with it so much that we're scared to be a person that doesn't have it.
yeah, 100%. I know it's kind of a word that really resonates with me a lot, and I know you use it as well as the word hope,
Hmm.
especially dealing with recovery and first responders. What's your message of hope to the people listening right now?
Yeah, hope is, I mentioned it earlier, the changing your perspectives is a powerful um, thing that happens in recovery of trauma, is changing how you see things. Because then you change how you see yourself, which changes your worldview, and then eventually changes your experience or your relationships with other people. So a way of hope or showing hope to people is maybe how that starts, where you're able to change your perspective on something. So people like you who, are experiencing post-traumatic growth, or you're doing amazing things because of the experiences that you've had. People like me and all the people that I've spoken at my conferences and all the people that I see when I travel, when other people are kind of stuck in that and they can see, well, if Dan can do it, um, if you can do it, then maybe I can do it. It gives them hope, that, and that hope is the start to changing their perspective, that, maybe this isn't a death sentence. Maybe this isn't. So hope is very, very, very powerful. It's not just, a nebulous thing, that it really changes your thinking. And when we work with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is one of the most popular forms of trauma therapy, it's the idea is that your thinking results in your emotions, and your emotions result in your behavior. So if we can go in there and um, try some interventions to alter your thinking of how you think and perceive things, then that will change your emotions, which will change your behaviors. So hope fits right in there. So hope will change your thinking, which will result in changing your emotions, which will change your behavior. But like going through that forest I mentioned earlier on, where there's no pathway, and you have to build new pathways, man, that's tough. Like you need to start somewhere where you are going through a thick forest wielding a machete, and it takes a lot more energy than that going down in a Ferrari at 300 miles an hour down that 12-lane highway. There's really very little resistance to that. So it's a difficult process, but it can totally be done. And it has been done. There's hundreds of us that are living proof
Yeah. Beautiful.
through having the hope to do it.
Mhm. And I assume your foundation, your conference, your artwork is all to kind of inspire hope. Am I
Yes,
right there? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the whole idea of
Yeah.
helping people. I know for me and many other people that were in that position, trauma impairs your cognitive functions and your memory. And it's difficult to do the work or even find out even the paperwork that you get. So let's say you're diagnosed and then WCB or BC safety, I can't remember what it's called, the same thing there, or WCB, that
Yeah.
work safe. That's right. Where then you get this paperwork you have to fill out. And even that is a big challenge sometimes.
Yeah.
Maybe for someone that isn't impaired by trauma, it's not that much of a challenge. But for someone who can't remember the things they could remember, no problem, it's a big hurdle to get over sometimes.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, our foundation really want to help people with, to kind of at least find the help that they need and help them through that process of the road to recovery and post-traumatic growth, hopefully.
Yeah. Beautiful. So tell us a little bit about your foundation, how it may be formed, and kind of what services you're providing to Canada.
Well, we just started. So we're babies. So we just got our charitable fund, our status a couple of months ago.
Awesome.
So our first year, probably year and a half, is going to be fundraising so we can actually do the work. But it kind of started with, as my artwork started to progress and become more popular, and I started to connect with a lot of our peers, me and my system, we get emails every day from people asking for help or sharing their story or reaching out to us. And we have this network of resources for everybody around the world. Okay, where are you from? Okay, we know this place here that can help you. And we get that a lot. And then other people would come and say, look, we really want to support organizations helping first responders. Where should we go? And then we'll have this other network of, we will vouch for these different places. So I started thinking, well, now that I'm going to be a therapist, I'm going to start my own foundation where people can come, and we'll have a team of people that can help them find the therapy that they need. If they don't have the resources or don't have the benefits or don't even want to use their benefits, because the stigma involved there may be significant, then we will pay for that therapy for them. And then we'll continue doing, we do that symposium every year anyways. I've been doing it myself out of a Dan Sun thing, but we'll do that under the conference or the foundation next. So we do have a website. It's the Recovery and Resiliency Foundation, and all the information is on there. And right now we're focusing on fundraising so we can start paying for therapy for people. So probably not going to happen until probably next year. I think a year of fundraising and strategies and 5-year plans and all the stuff that charities do is kind of our plan. Very excited about it though.
Yeah, it's a fantastic job. All the people that would be a part of this, are they just Canadian, or is this North American, or across the world?
Yeah, it's a national foundation, so it's within Canada.
Yep.
So I'm not able to anything outside of Canada. I still have resources, in England and Finland and lots in the United States. So people still contact us from those places. We can set them up with the help that they need, like steer them in the right direction.
Mhm.
But our foundation will be all across Canada. My goal, I always have big dreams about a lot of things. I'm hoping, as I should, right? And I'm lucky that they usually come true. And my plan is to actually have intake centers all across Canada, an actual physical building where people can come to or contact. They can talk to somebody there. That's where they can do the resources. That's where they can, do an intake. That's where they have the therapy. That's where, we can have a woodworking shop in there. We can do, a gym in there. We can do things that are mental health. And it's not just for first responders, it's anybody. And when you think of trauma as population, the first responder community is actually a pretty small sliver of that pie. When you think of, child abuse victims and how that affects us in adulthood. And
Yeah, definitely.
like there's assault, and like there's a lot of trauma, a lot of people suffering the effects of trauma.
Yeah.
So our foundation is set to help everybody. So my goal is to help lots of people and to set them in the right path and put them in effective healing modalities for them and pay for their therapy if they need it.
I can't wait to see that come to fruition.
Oh, I know, right? I'm so excited. I was so passionate when I started realizing I wanted to become a paramedic. So learning to become a paramedic, I'm like, oh my God, I love this stuff. Like I'll do extra reading stuff because I just loved it. And then same thing with becoming a therapist. I just love it. I'm reading all these psychology books, even over and above, because I'm just so passionate about it. And so now with this foundation, because I know we're going to be able to help people. And I know that although things are so much better now, stigma wise, than they were 10 years ago, there's still a long ways to go. And I just have established all these incredible resources from traveling the world, that I want to kind of pull this stuff all together and help our peers or help anybody suffering from trauma. I know that I can do it. Well, not just me. It's not going to be me. It'll be a whole team of us that are going to be able to do that. So it's pretty exciting. And I feel very passionate about it.
Love it. I love to hear that. I can hear it in your voice for sure.
Oh yeah. When I think about it, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. It's a ton of work. It's a ton of work, but I know it's going to happen, and it doesn't feel like work because it's, I know it can be done.
Mhm. Do you have any concerns in the back of your mind about doing this work and kind of reliving your own traumas? Does that concern you at all, or have you processed it enough to know how to manage that in the future?
Yeah, therapy, that's very possible. We'll call it countertransference, where if I'm helping a paramedic who had very similar experiences to me and they're sharing experiences that I had, I think I'll definitely be able to connect with them as a peer. But me personally, I think I've done enough of my recovery and enough of my healing that those traumatic pathways have been pruned over.
Yeah. I love that.
And it has happened. Like I have spoken with I still do with peers that have come to me with they want to verbalize their experiences with me. They want to, and we'll do that. And then, at this point, I can definitely empathize with them. But I don't have that automatic emotional and physical response that used to happen. So I've learned to intervene that with my frontal lobe, kind of interrupt that HPA axis thing of that automatic fear, emotion response, emotion thing that happens. So no, I think I'm good.
Well, right
But
there, that's
you
like
never
a
know.
definition of a successful hope story, right? Because
Mhm.
people are listening right now, they're like, how do you get out of this and never, is there recovery? Can I actually recover and get out of this swirl of
Yeah.
hell?
Yeah. And
And
that's, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and you can, right?
Yeah, totally. You
yeah.
totally can. And that's what I keep hearing people say, well, if you're going to be a first responder, you're going to get PTSD. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you're not. Like, yeah, you're going to see stuff that you probably know you're going to see, but it's probably going to affect you in ways that you weren't anticipating. But you can prepare for that based on, developing your own self-care plan and your mental health jump kit before you actually need it. Like, who's your therapist? Know that before you need it. What are your coping mechanisms? Figure that out before you need it. So there's work that can be done there. And then other people are saying, once you have PTSD, that's it. You're going to have it forever. I don't believe that either. Even if you go by the textbook version of the definition in the DSM-5 of what states, like I no longer meet the criteria for PTSD.
Oh, really?
By looking through that, like if you go by that specific criteria, and then which is the official diagnosis, I don't meet that criteria anymore.
Wow. That's
Which technically means that I don't have it. So I'm living proof that I've been diagnosed with it twice. But I no longer have those symptoms because I've rewired my brain.
Yep.
Or I shouldn't take all the credit, but with the help of many people, put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
So I'd love to dig into what's in your self-care toolkit. What do you do on a daily basis to
artwork?
maintain?
I do artwork every day. So for me, I need to utilize the creative aspect of my brain.
Nice.
And that's a powerful thing for the recovery process. So even some of my clients that I have, I encourage them to learn a new instrument, even if it's the kazoo. And you take kazoo lessons on YouTube. You can learn to play any instrument in the world on YouTube. You just look for lessons and it's there.
Yep.
You can buy a guitar off of eBay or Facebook Marketplace for like $50 and take lessons. And what's happening there is that you don't have to be good at it, but something creative. You're activating a different part of your brain, and balancing out your two hemispheres, reconnecting your left and right hemispheres by doing that. So I think doing that in conjunction with talk therapy is important. So for me, it's doing the artwork. I do play guitar, continue to play guitar. I actually want to learn, once I'm done school, I'm going to learn to play the cello. It's only got 4 strings. How hard can it be? Right?
That's right.
Play guitar. It's got 6, only 4 strings. How can't be that hard. So I'm gonna rent a cello. I want to learn. I love the sound of the cello, so I'm gonna learn how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on the cello. And even though I feel like I'm in this post-traumatic growth phase, it doesn't mean that I'm this, mental superhero all the time. Of course not. I'll wake up sometimes and still feel really depressed. But the difference now is I know I can recognize it. I'm like, okay, this isn't a bad day. My neural pathways, or maybe I had a weird dream that made me feel this way. And so I'll do certain things that I'll take my dog for a walk. We'll go, it's called forest bathing is what they call it in Japan. Here, it's just ecotherapy. So I'll take my dog for a walk in the forest. I won't listen to slow, sucky music on those days because I know if I listen to slow, depressing, well, not necessarily depressing music, but slow emotional music when I'm feeling depressed, just makes me go deeper and deeper and deeper in it. But sometimes if I'm in a creative space, then I will listen to that music and actually enhances the emotional, the creative process. So for me, it's my dog, Dexter, my bulldog, walking and being in nature, being creative. Those are my coping. And then of course I do have a psychologist that I know that I can contact if things are rough, that I can reach out and talk to them. And plus I've established some really great relationships with friends where I have a connection with them. We have an accountability connection. And this is something I share when building your self-care plan. I do a peer support workshop, or I go and speak with peer support members and help them, because that's extra pressure on top of their already pressure job. That's another whole podcast right there.
Yeah, true.
But one of the things I tell them, which is something that I was told with some people that know more actually about this stuff than I do, is to have an accountability partner, right? So you build let's say you're my accountability partner. And we make that agreement that, okay, if I need you, I'm going to call you, and vice versa. And you need to answer the phone if you can. And we both know who our therapists are. We both know who each other's what our coping mechanisms are. So let's say if I phone you and I'm impaired with trauma, then you already have that information. Like, okay, well, I know that one of your coping mechanisms is grounding techniques, and your favorite one is box breathing. So you can tell me and coach me through box breathing. So having that accountability partner, a person that you can turn to if you're kind of having a bad day, and having that agreement with them, it has to go both ways. But also the big thing too, what you would do is if you've noticed changes in my behavior and my mood, then you need to call me on it too. Like, hey man, I'm your accountability partner. This is our agreement. You're being a bit of an asshole this last week, and you're being really withdrawn and you're kind of shut down. I'm just checking on you because that's what I care about you, and that's what we're supposed to do to each other. So I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as we agreed, right? So that's another big part of it too.
Would this
So
be
I love
somebody
that.
you're very close with,
Someone very-
or,
so,
or
yeah,
distant? It could be, or
Um,
somebody you see on a regular basis.
probably someone you see on a regular basis.
Yeah,
So for
yeah.
the peer support team, people will be someone that you work with,
Right. Yeah.
right? So where you notice those changes, in each other. So you make this agreement and this plan before you actually need it. And the analogy I use is if you're going on a call for a shortness of breath and you show up and the person's, severe asthma, that's not the time to put together your airway kit. Like, say, oh, what do we need? Okay. Like, you bring your airway kit, everything's already prepped in there, that you have it in place.
Yeah.
So the same thing I feel should be done for your mental health. Like, figure out what your mental health jump kit is so that when it happens, you're prepared.
Love it.
And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Really.
So to finish off, this is a new question I'm asking this series. What does Daniel need more support in his life? Where could you do more support to make you even more thriving than you are?
Wow. I feel so supported in my life. Like, so many people have been so supportive of what I do. I think for me, the big thing I'm focusing on now is my foundation, or
Mm.
people somehow support my foundation in some way
Mhm.
to help me do that. Even if people want to get involved in the foundation, like we're looking for people to help, looking for volunteers to help with the foundation. That's really where my focus is. But for me personally, I really feel I'm pretty well supported.
That's awesome.
And I know that I'm lucky that I was able to establish that. Um, yeah. So no one's ever asked me that before. That's a good question. I really have to think about it.
Well, I'm kind of polling the audience, I guess you could say, of what are the things that are still gaps in our wellness plans, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the emphasis of that question is to, where do we still need support that we haven't quite revealed yet?
Yeah. No, for me, I think also going through this program, learning to become a counseling therapist, has been a really growing experience for me personally as well.
Mhm.
So I've learned quite a bit going through this class, and I've kind of worked out a lot of the stuff as I go. I'm like, oh yeah, that's something I need some help on. Um,
That's good. I think
yeah, I
support
think
with
that,
the foundation is
yeah,
perfect.
I think, yeah, yeah, I don't think that might be a bit of a cop out answer.
Well, it's your dream and you want to see it come to fruition.
Yeah,
And
because that would make me feel,
yeah,
once that is up and going and we are helping people,
100%.
then that's going to make me feel
100%.
even better than I am now.
Beautiful.
Right. So,
Well,
yeah.
it's been a real honor to chat with you today, and hopefully we get to know each other a bit better over the coming
Yeah,
years.
no, you're stuck with me now.
Yeah, I
We're
love it.
now connected, and I know
Yeah,
who you are and what you do, and so now you're on my resource list
I
for
love it. Love
lots
it.
of things. And
Yeah,
hey, maybe I'm gonna have you come talk at one of our conferences.
yeah, love to.
Yeah,
So, saying that, how can people learn more about the conference, maybe your artwork, and if they want to connect with you personally?
yeah. So you can go on my website's dansunphotos.com. So it's the first three letters of my first and last name. So DAN and SUN. Even if you just Google that, lots of stuff will pop up. But my website's dansunphotos.com. The foundation is Recovery and Resiliency Foundation.com. That's a lot of letters. But the link to that too is, oh, do I have that link on my website? I don't think I do, because the Dan Sun I want to be separate from the foundation. But that's how you can reach me and get a hold of me. And
Fantastic.
please do.
And when's the next conference?
Well, we're planning it now for sometime in October. We usually do it in October.
October. Yeah.
Last couple that we've done have been in Canmore at the Malcolm, beautiful spot right in the mountains. But we're looking at different locations right now. Maybe actually we're thinking maybe in Souk, perhaps, of
Oh, yeah.
BC,
Yeah.
on the
Beautiful.
island, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice spot. Yeah.
yeah. Still in the works.
Beautiful. Well, it's been an honor, like I said, and I've been following your work for many, many years. And every fire station I go into, it's quite often I'll see a print of some of your
Oh,
artwork.
that's
And
great. I love it. I love that.
I
That's
was just
fantastic.
up in a interior fire department, and in the hallway when I was walking in, oh, there's a big image. It was the one of the red helmet. I think it was a paramedic and a police officer. All
Oh yeah,
three
yeah,
portrait. Yeah,
yeah. That's a popular one. That one's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, and those are all emergency workers. They're not models. I never use models in my, well, they're models, but they are actually
People.
people that are working in that profession. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, it's been a pleasure being on your show. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this great conversation and got inspired by Daniel's growth and his use of art. And I truly think creativity is something that was lacking in my life as well. And when you can hit that creativity button and flex that muscle, things will change in your life for
Yeah.
sure. So,
You don't have to be good at it.
no,
That doesn't
exactly.
matter.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.